Americana icon Brandi Carlile and British rock and pop legend Elton John blew the proverbial door off the hinges when they announced in February that they would be releasing a collaboration album. Who Believes in Angels was released this past Friday, and I believe that the hype leading up to it was well deserved. The album that resulted from this collaboration is something unique within itself. An album that pushed each artist outside their comfort zone, while celebrating the things that make their music and their relationship so meaningful. Let's start with how this record came to be. Brandi has been a longtime admirer of Elton John, citing that her affinity for the singer began all the way back in grade school, when she did a school report on Ryan White, a famous AIDS advocate who helped alleviate some of the public stigma around the disease. She learned through a library book that Elton had been a friend of Ryan's and a supporter of his cause, and she discovered the lyrics to Skyline Pigeon, the song that Elton famously played at Ryan's funeral. This led her down a path of discovery, checking out whatever books and records she could from the library, and even giving a performance of Honky Cat, dressed as Elton, in the Pacific Northwest talent circuit as a kid. Brandi's admiration for Elton continued through her adolescence and adulthood. Finally, in 2009, with a few accolades behind her and more connections in the music industry, she got up the nerve to ask Elton John if he would perform on her song Caroline, kicking off a long mentorship and friendship, supporting one another on and off over the past 16 years. As it turns out, this record was a long time coming. The recording session for Who Believes in Angels took place in October 2023, more than 18 months before the album would come out. This was likely to make space for Elton's farewell tour through 2023 and 24, as well as the corresponding concert movie, before going all in on press for this album. The album teaser video revealed that the initial few days of recording were contentious and difficult, but once tensions faded, it became an extremely rewarding and creative recording session. Overseeing the production was Andrew Watt, a notable pop and rock producer who has worked with everyone from Justin Bieber to the Rolling Stones. Along with longtime Elton John lyricist Bernie Taupin, the four wrote each song on this album and recorded it with a cast of backing musicians that included members of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and legendary bassist Pino Palladino. I think the conditions set out at the beginning of this recording process were perfect for creating something completely new. Brandi would be entering the studio without the Hansaroth twins for the first time in decades, a change that probably pushed her outside her comfort zone. And Elton was looking for a new project that would push his limits and force him to collaborate with other artists. He even went on record as saying, in regards to this album, he didn't want to just create another Elton John album. Getting into the songs, there are three major themes that show up on multiple songs throughout this record: faith, mortality, and the LGBTQ+ experience. These themes intertwine throughout the record, with a combination of them showing up on multiple songs throughout. I think the perspective on mortality is probably the most striking theme on this album, mostly because there's a sense of urgency behind it. Elton John right now is in his 70s, and aging and the inevitability of the end are certainly on his mind, even if he is feeling defiant about it like he is on Never Too Late. The closing track, an Elton John solo cut called When This Old World Is Done With Me, makes it abundantly clear that time being limited is something that's on his mind. However, it also offers a sense of peace about this notion, singing, "Release me like an ocean wave, return me to the tide." Elton has a unique perspective here too, because in a lot of ways he did get a second chance at life. In his younger days, his use of drugs and alcohol to excess was well known, but after getting clean a few decades ago, he was able to chart a path towards recovery and self-acceptance. A path that ultimately resulted in him coming fully out of the closet and living as his true self. I think that's what makes a song like Never Too Late so affecting, knowing that Elton was able to turn his life around and live as he was meant to be. The song might sound cliche or insincere if it were to be cut by another artist, but just knowing the full weight of his story adds an extra layer to it. I'm going to continue talking about Who Believes in Angels here in a moment, but before I do, if you're enjoying this video, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel. I talk about roots music on here, all sorts of different stuff in the worlds of Americana, alt country, folk, those types of genres of music. And if you like that kind of stuff, this is a great place to follow along. Might be talking about some of your favorite artists here soon. Alright, back to the video. I imagine to some degree, whether it's an intentional choice or something subconscious, Brandi is trying to use this album as a way to do for young people what Elton's music did for her when she was a young woman. Give someone permission to be themselves. Even though the LGBTQ+ community has made a lot of strides in the past decade, it's important to remember that gay marriage has only been legal in the United States for less than 10 years. and there are many actors within our government that are still trying to trample on their rights. And beyond these structural issues, many people face bullying, harassment, and apathy from their friends, classmates, family members, and other members of their community, leading to a feeling of isolation, loneliness, and otherness. For a young Brandi Carlile, discovering Elton's music was a path out of this and towards acceptance of herself. That idea of being comfortable within one's own identity is what underlines songs like the title track, Who Believes in Angels, which takes a pat-in-the-back approach by saying, I've been there, as well as Swing for the Fences, which I actually think takes a similar approach to the lyrics of a song like The Joke, saying, know your own strength and prove them wrong. And though I think these songs were probably written with the intention of supporting gay youth in mind, I do think the message itself is broad enough that it can really apply to anyone that's having trouble accepting something about themselves, about being comfortable within your own skin, no matter what that means. And I think that's something that's always been great about Elton's music. I think it's a common theme in Brandi's music as well, and so to see them both do that together is spectacular. Faith is where this album really gets interesting to me because there is a bit of a push and a pull going on here. Elton is a staunch atheist, and Brandi is a devout Christian, but also a Christian who has had her faith weaponized against her. In her book Broken Horses, Brandi reveals how coming out led to her being disowned by her congregation as a teenager, an incident that caused her to struggle with her faith for years. Maybe in an indirect way, but I think there is a clear path from that incident to the song Little Richard's Bible. Little Richard was famously one of the first openly gay musicians, and yet his sexuality was something he struggled with all his life, in large part because the religious institutions he was involved with told him it was wrong. Little Richard lived a life tortured by friction between his sexuality and his religious beliefs, making him somewhat of a tragic figure. Elton and Brandi approach this part of his story with a sense of empathy, but they also are celebrating the way that he was able to break barriers. Keep in mind, Little Richard was one of the first black rock artists to be able to cross over to white audiences in the Jim Crow South. That's an accomplishment worth celebrating as well. It's a fitting tribute full of the same contradictions that underline Little Richard's life, and it's a song that's just as interesting to examine as it is fun to just bop along to. Other tracks like Never Too Late, A Little Light, and Who Believes in Angels also incorporate this theme of faith, even if it might be a bit more superficial. However, in its dealing with faith, I think the main point that this album underscores is the tension between spirituality and organized religion. At no point does this album ever fully denounce the idea of faith. That would honestly be a pretty wild thing for Brandi to agree to. But it is skeptical of the institutions that surround it, and not afraid to call them out on hypocrisy. That philosophy feels parallel with, if not fully present, in the way that this album takes a stance on faith. I think this reflects the experience of members of the LGBTQ+ community who have embraced faith, despite the fact that they're often targeted by religious groups. Sonically, this is a pop rock album, and Andrew Watt's production really brings that out. Brandi's vocals take a more commanding presence on this album. In fact, I think she probably sings more than Elton does on it. But the style of the instrumental is more in line with an Elton John album. Something that's abundantly clear in the album's first track, The Rose of Laura Nyro, which starts with this extended instrumental intro, reminiscent of the same one that's on 1973's Funeral for a Friend, the first song off of Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Brandi does bring some Americana roots influence into the equation on songs like The Riverman and A Little Light, but the primary sound of this record is driven by electric guitar and piano, with touches of synths, huge background vocals, and horns at times, elements that, dare I say, are more at home in an Elton John album than a Brandi Carlile one. I am really curious about how the songwriting process on this album went. So, for all the songs of the record, all four participants, Brandi, Elton, Bernie, and Andrew, are credited as equal writers. However, the idea that every song was an equal collaboration in terms of songwriting is preposterous to me, for a couple of reasons. First off, Elton John and Bernie Taupin's writing relationship has always, at its simplest, been like this. Bernie writes the lyrics, Elton composes music to them. That seems like that's a pretty rigid system that's hard to break. and also kind of hard to insert yourself into. I think it's more likely that Bernie wrote some lyrics and then Brandi looked over them and made some edits, and then Elton composed some piano parts, but then Andrew was like, oh no, hey, I want to add this part to it too. It would be interesting if we combine this bridge in there. I don't think there was a one-size-fits-all solution for writing songs on this album is what I'm getting at. I think every case has got to be unique. Also factor in that Laura Nyro was credited as a co-writer on The Rose of Laura Nyro, which, I don't know, did she compose something with Elton John that later became this song long after her death? Or is this more just because, like, her influence is very present in the song and they thought it would be right to credit her? That information might be out there, who knows, but I am curious how this all came together. There are a lot of highs on this record, but for me, I think my favorite song has gotta be The Riverman, even though Someone to Belong To is probably a very close second. I just love the explosive chorus on this song. After a somewhat mellow verse, that wall of sound is just so jolting, but also in a very exciting and fun way. It's beautiful. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what this song is about. My interpretation is that it's maybe an ode to the weekend warrior musicians, the type of guys that have a day job during the week, but then go out to clubs and bars on the weekend and play their heart out. There's also maybe some nods to either Memphis or New Orleans here. I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna guess maybe Memphis just because there's kind of a bluesy gospel thing going on here, and that's maybe more associated with Memphis, but I'm not 100% sure either. Who is the Riverman? Do we know who this guy is? I think what I like about this song most is that it's a good combination of the best of each artist's bag. You've got that like kind of folky acoustic guitar part and the big vocals coming from Brandi, and you have that rocking piano part and the pop production coming more out of Elton's wheelhouse. You're smashing those two pieces together in a really explosive way, and it works so well. It really brings the song to life. And I'd say that my main critiques of this album are all just like very small things. For instance, I love the song Little Richard's Bible, but I do feel like Elton's vocals are not up high enough in the mix, or at least are not EQ'd in a way that they have clarity apart from the other elements in the song. I also get why they did the woos in it, but I kind of wish they had just like kept it to maybe one time, because over and over, truth be told, felt a little corny to me, but I get why they did it. There are some production choices that feel a bit inorganic to me, like for instance maybe some of the ways that vocals are filtered in these songs, but really that's more of a matter of personal taste than anything. As a whole, I really like what this album is doing, and I'd say probably like 95% of the time I like what Andrew Watt is doing from a production perspective. As I mentioned in my initial video about this project, I'm always a little skeptical about collaboration albums. There are some great ones out there, but there are also some that's like these two great artists come together and it's like, was that really the best that you guys could have done? I'm happy to say I do not feel that way about Who Believes in Angels. I think this is a great record. There are some legitimately great songs on this album, and it feels like a record that could only exist with this particular group coming together. I'm going to offer up a take really quick that might be controversial, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I really enjoy this record. I think as a solo performer, I think Brandi has it in her to make a better album than this. I'm not quite convinced at this point in time that Elton John does. I think there's a reason that he's been looking for more collaborative projects recently, because working with other artists does help bring out the best in him. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just don't think he'd be able to produce the same results going the same tried and true route. Before this, Elton's most recent two releases were releasing the first album he ever recorded that ended up being shelved by the label, and then also a collaboration album he did with other artists during COVID, where some of the songs were songs he had already recorded or covers. And I want to be clear, I don't think this is an age thing. I've seen plenty of releases by artists in their 70s and 80s that have blown me away. I'm just not so sure that he feels like he can do a solo record at this point. I think the collaboration, he recognizes that brings something great out in him, and he wants to pursue that. This is all speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. And in fact, I kind of hope that now he's off the road, he has more time to devote to the studio craft and songwriting and composition, and maybe he'll prove me wrong on that, I don't know. Just a sense I'm getting off of this project and other projects he's put out recently. Overall, I think Who Believes in Angels was a very fruitful collaboration and a must listen for fans of both artists. I'd rank this album very high in my favorite albums so far this year, and I hope they decide to do some more live shows with this album. Even if they're sparse, I would love to hear these live. What did you think of this collaboration? Did you have a favorite song on the album? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Brent Funkhauser from Red Moon Media. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy roots music, go ahead and subscribe and follow along. I cover all sorts of music in the worlds of Americana, folk, alt country, and any type of roots music out there, and I might be talking about some of your favorite artists here soon.